Welcome everyone to the Saskatchewan Links to Learning, whether you're here right now or somebody who's going to be watching the recording later. It's always beautiful to come together in the spirit of learning and inclusion and just, though we can't necessarily be together in person, that's always the best. And so my name is Aubrey. I'm the youth director or the student director for CanDo, and I'm coming to you from beautiful Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And so I don't know where everyone else is coming from, but like I said, here it's not necessarily the most sunny out, but you know what? Still beautiful, better than -40. So I will take it where I can get it for sure. But welcome. We have here with us Justin, and this is coming together virtually with Zoom 101. But before we do get into how I like to say the meat and potatoes of everything, I will pass it off to Michelle just to go over a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you, Aubrey. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad, so honored that you've joined us this afternoon. You chose us. Really good presentation. Justice is bringing his expertise and his knowledge around Zoom. I don't know about you, but in the last year, I've really had to up my game online. And it's been a good journey. It's been, a journey of many, many, many mistakes, a couple panic attacks in there just because I'm like, what's going on? So I think today's conversation, today's workshop is really good. We've learned, but I think this is a really good refresher. There was some pieces in there that I didn't know that he's going to bring to the table. So just come with an open mind, open heart, ready to learn. I think this is one of the new ways that we are going forward. We're kind of always holding our breath and we're waiting just to go back to the normal. But I think this online platform is going to be one of our new normals, and I don't mind it. Once I got worked through all those kinks, it's all right. So just thankful to Creator for the gift of another day, the gift to learn, the gift to still be in community, whether it's virtual. I'm here in Treaty 6 in Amiskwichi, Waskagan, so Edmonton area. And so Aubrey's in Treaty 6 in Saskatoon, and here we are able to connect, and Justin is coming to us from BC. So we just, are so grateful and thankful for this modern technology that allows us still to connect with one another. So Justin's going to present. There will be opportunity for questions and answers and conversation, and maybe even some stories at the end. So we'd love to hear from you. In the event you have some questions throughout, please feel free to use the chat box, drop those questions or comments in there. And we would also love to know where you're joining us from. So feel free to let us know where you are living, where are you hanging your hat these days. So there's going to be an evaluation link sent to you after this workshop. And if you could please fill that out, your voice is really important to us. When you fill that out, your name will be entered to win a draw. There's two $400 Visa gift cards up for grabs. So you have, I know, Kate, I know, $400. Like, what would I do with that? Ooh, the clothes I would buy. So we'd love for you just to fill that out because we think your voice, your feedback is really important. So we just welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us. And Justin, I'm going to pass the mic off to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Aubrey. Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone, as it happens to be now. Just as Michelle was saying, if at any point over the next hour or so you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or give a raised hand or something. My name is Justin Chorines. My Haida name is Tsiladung from the Yoklanis clan of the Haida Nation. I have been working with Cardin Consulting, who's working with CanDo for this for about 2 years now, just under 2 years, doing anything and everything that's needed from governance and support building to strategic planning to this kind of workshop development. All of this experience that I'm going to share with you today comes from about 10 years of audio-visual technical work as well as computer engineering and a whole background in support and customer service. So I'm going to screen share a little presentation to help give some visual and contextual aid to what I'm saying so that you know that I'm not completely going bonkers when I refer to a picture on screen. Today, we're talking about coming together virtually, and that applies in a few different ways, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. Originally, it says at the bottom, Justin Chorines and Mark Salter. Mark couldn't be here today. He had a conflicting meeting, but I know he's somewhere giggling about all this, so I'll take it as though he's here with us. So this all comes with the pretext that I am currently living and working on the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in Vancouver, BC. I'm very proud to be here and proud to be working with Cardin Consulting and doing all of this work. The approaches we use and the methods we use are very long practiced and honed, so we're trying our very best to bring good information to everyone out there. Because they did such a good job introducing me, I don't think I'll need to spend too long on this. So I'll move on to what we're here for today. The first bit is what is remote conferencing software, equipment and how to use it, before a meeting, facilitation tips, a 5-minute break where I encourage you to get something caffeinated and or a cuddly blankie or pillow of your favorite choosing, what to do after a meeting, a conference, facilitation, education, whatever you'd like to call it, technical difficulties as they arise and what the best way to deal with them is, and then a closing Q&A. So if you'd like to raise your hand throughout any of those things because you know, I remember I wanted to ask about how green screens work, or I wanted to know what the purpose of a microphone was, now's the time. So getting into the very first part of it, we're going to talk about why Zoom is important within this context. Obviously, it's been a tool over the last year or so to allow a lot of people to connect where otherwise they might not be. You are here in Zoom, you know this already. The reason it's important specifically within Indigenous communities is because it allows a voice to those people who might not otherwise have had some, whether it be limits to internet, stable or otherwise, or even electricity as a base, or a remoteness to their physical locale from maybe a nation office or even from their community, people living away from home in the States or overseas. There's a lot of people who might not otherwise be able to participate in community engagements or votes within their nation. This is a tool that allows us to bring those things much closer to home and do it in a good way. And I say that last part very intentionally because we don't want to just adopt what we see Fortune 500 companies using and expect it to work in smaller scale, more personally driven Indigenous communities. They're very different audiences and they need to be treated with respect. Moving on a little bit, what is remote conferencing software? What does that term mean? And that's a great question. I'm so glad you've asked. This platform is not new. Video conferencing software has been around for a long time. Even before it existed as a product, it was an idea in Star Trek, the 60s. So it's been around for a while, and there have been a few. Zoom is not the only one. Microsoft Teams is one you might be familiar with. WebEx or EasyTalks is one you might be familiar with. There's a whole bunch, and they all operate on the same premise. A visual picture is sent and received, an audio signal is sent and received. Maybe things like screen share or green screen, little things are thrown in there to mix it up and make them different, but they're all more or less the same. So for today, we're just going to be talking about Zoom because a lot of the same principles apply. And if you have a specific question about, I don't know how to do this in Teams, then we'll cross that bridge when we get there, if at some point we need to. Now, we're going to break down all of these softwares to essentially 5 different categories. The first one being general settings, and that covers the basics. Are you on or are you offline? Where is this program located on your computer? How are you feeling today? A lot of those very basic things that don't need to be changed on a day-to-day basis, but might be handy for you to do at some point and set up initially rather than waiting until, I forgot to do that and doing it at the time of. The next is audio-video settings. These are something I would recommend you review all the time because it covers everything from standalone microphones to webcams to making sure you look and sound as you'd like, rather than just letting it at the whims of whoever your producer of your laptop is, Apple or something. We'll talk about those in greater detail, I promise. That's a big part of this whole presentation. But we'll also get into moderation settings and why those are important, making sure that people have proper access to chat and that it's used properly, muting of microphones, allowing certain people into meetings if it's a closed engagement, say maybe a community meeting where only members would be accepted participants. Those kinds of things are very easy to regulate if you do them in advance. Functionality settings is a term I kind of branched all those things together with. Green screens, sharing of individual programs, uploading of files, all those things which you might not need every single time you log into Zoom or a web conferencing software, but are very handy when you do need them. Profile settings is a little more specific to Zoom, because as some of you might be aware, Zoom has a 1-hour time limit for free accounts. That is, for instance, something you would need to look into profile settings to remedy. I would highly recommend you fix that in advance, because the last thing you want to be doing is hosting a meeting and then suddenly an hour in it goes dead. You need to resend a link and there's a whole process. So that avoids some of that confusion ahead of time. Now, going a little further on, I told you we'd talk about this, is the camera and audio portion of all of this. Now, it's hard to visually describe audio quality. We'll get there in a second, but the first two examples there are a poorly lit woman with a window behind her, and Mark Salter, my colleague, who is doing his very best to look charming and demure, and I think he pulls it off. And that's done with a few principles that are common in photography and videography, which can be very easily replicated at home or in an office. The first one is lights facing towards you. Something very often overlooked is that right now, in front of me here, I have several big lights pointed directly at my face. That's because a camera works the same way as the human eye. It receives light and forms an image. If there's only light coming from behind me, none is bouncing off my face and getting to you, so I'll be very dark. You need to have lights that are coming towards your face and then bouncing off it into the camera. Otherwise, you will be poorly lit. People won't be able to see you, those tiny little facial expressions, your beautiful smile, no one will be able to see. So you want to keep that in mind. Having no lights, bright lights behind you is a part of that as well. Speaking of behind, we have backgrounds. Something that some people sort of get into the habit of thinking about a little bit. But it's mostly just, I should clean up my bed so people don't see the jacket I left there. We can go a little step further by making them static and less distracting. To prove a point, right now behind me I have a picture of a longhouse. It's not just a wooden wall. That's done with a green screen, for instance. And as interesting as the built-in Hawaiian tree thing might be, and as fun as it might be, it can be distracting, nor is it tonally appropriate for every situation. So having a background that is relevant, so for instance, bookcases is a great way to go, or a blank wall is even preferable to, say, a busy thoroughfare in your house, maybe by the living room where the kids are playing. It can be distracting to not only your audience, but also to yourself as you're watching them in the reflection or they end up throwing something. So keep that in mind. Now, the next part is something that I would argue is much more important, which is the audio that you're sending out. To demonstrate this, if I were to come down here and turn off my camera, you can still hear me. You can still understand me, I would hope. And the message I'm imparting doesn't change. However, if I were to mute my microphone, which I won't do today, suddenly the conversation comes to a halt. The presentation stops because I'm not well versed enough in sign language to continue on a conversation, and I imagine a large majority of our population isn't either. So we have to keep in mind that our audio is probably more important than our video, as much as we want to look as pretty as we can. So there's a few ways of going about this. Separate microphones, usually USB interface microphones, can be purchased for very cheap or very expensive, depending on how you're willing to go. And there is a difference. It's not just a way to blow through some extra cash. I'm going to demonstrate this now. You can hopefully hear me pretty darn clearly. I should be coming through relatively okay. As soon as I change the microphone to one that's built into my broadcasting computer here, the sound becomes tinny at best, hollow. I sound very far away. A lot of the background noise that you might not otherwise have heard, me drumming my fingers on the table, sounds terrible. And I know that. I've listened to it myself, don't worry. And if I switch back to my microphone here, hopefully you'll be able to hear me better. I'd appreciate maybe a thumbs up just so I know I've done that properly. But if you can hear a difference, that's fantastic. That means, thank you. That means that your audience will be able to hear a difference as well. And that's not just because you want to sound like the fancy radio announcer. It's because a lot of people in our communities don't have the same access that some of us do. Some may be listening through an old phone speaker where you don't want to sound hollow and tinny because they may not be able to understand you at all through those two levels of challenges. Or they might have hearing impairments, meaning they need all the help they can get. Or maybe they just don't have the same access to equipment that we do. There's a whole bunch of considerations that need to be kept in mind, and you need to make it as easy as possible for everyone to participate. That's a huge part of our Indigenous learning and teaching process. Now, I'm hoping you get what I'm going for with the fuzzy image of the sound and then the sharp image of the sound. Sharp, clear audio is easier to understand. A stable internet connection is a huge part of that because you want to be able to connect with your audience and not drop out suddenly or get only every third word in. A cabled connection, an Ethernet cable, which I'm sure you've all seen at some point, the little blue or yellow cables, is the way to go because it is more stable than Wi-Fi, as convenient as Wi-Fi is. Yes, we have a question. Go ahead, Kara. Katie, sorry.
Hi there. I'm just curious, when you were talking about having a separate microphone, I have not yet started doing Zoom webinars or meetings, but I want to make sure that I have the right equipment. Are there some that you can recommend that are reasonably priced for a startup?
I would love to. You've read my mind. I promise I didn't Martha Stewart this in, but our next slide will cover that, and that's pre-baked in. But the last point I'd like to mention before we get to that is very quickly I'd like to cover background noise. A lot of effort goes into a lot of presentation being clear. It doesn't matter how clear your voice is if someone is screaming right next to you, because my kid decided it'd be a great time to pretend to be Batman. As cute as that would be, it can distract from the tone, from the message I'm sharing, and it would make it hard for you to participate as either audience or maybe equal members in a meeting. So I'm going to continue on here to what's worth getting. Funny how we arrived there. I'm going to cover them in order of importance going from left to right. It is my belief that microphones are the most important because you need to be able to convey your messages. The camera could be off and you could still understand me. You could not be able to see my face with no lighting. You'd still be able to understand. A USB microphone can be purchased on Amazon for as little as $5. You can also Google what is the best microphone and very easily arrive at the conclusion that I need this $30,000 professional level microphone or nothing else will do. Very easy to get sucked into those internet rabbit holes. There's a few different levels, and it comes down to what you're comfortable with, both on a budgeting perspective and also what you think would meet your needs. I would always recommend reading ahead. If you're thinking about purchasing something, someone else has purchased it at some point. I've lost count of the amount of microphones I've purchased over the years and had to test out and try and use for professional use. But suffice to say, they all end up being very, very similar. It comes down to your capacity to use them. The $5 microphone will always sound better than the $3,000 one if you don't know how to use the $3,000 one. So USB microphones are usually just you plug one in into the microphone if it's not already plugged in, one into your computer, and it will work. Just like that. Though sometimes it requires third-party software or you might need an interface. More expensive microphones use a connector called XLR, which is an audio cable you might have seen before plugged into speakers or microphones. There's a whole lot I could go into on this. I'm only going to use an hour of your time today, so I'm not going to bore you to death, I promise. Suffice to say, looking on Google, trying to find maybe best microphones for Zoom. There's going to be some recommendations. Google each of the models you are interested in separately and try and find what would work best for your use case. Camera falls into much the same category. You can buy a webcam for a couple bucks from the dollar store, or you could get a $50,000 DSLR custom setup with rigs and lighting and everything. That doesn't mean it's going to be good if you're not comfortable using it. You need to make sure that what you have is what you're comfortable with and is going to most closely match your needs. So I would advise the same process. Google what's going to be best for you, read up on those individual models, and find if people have had issues or if their use case is similar to yours. Lighting is a little bit more objective. It's easy to say that a little ring light, like I have in the very first top right picture there, is going to be more accessible than studio lighting, as you'll see in the bottom picture. Those little ring lights that clip to the lid of a laptop or a monitor of some kind and are powered via a little cable that plugs into your computer, super handy. I use them all the time. I use one for our personal meetings to work. Though studio lighting is better if you're using something like a green screen that I have here behind me. Hopefully you can tell, maybe, sort of. The benefits and disadvantages are easy to find online, so I won't harp on them too long. But suffice to say, the more lighting, the better. But do what you're comfortable with. Those little ring lights, perfectly acceptable for a home setup. If you want to go the little extra step, you might need to get something more powerful. Moving on a little bit, unless someone would like to interrupt with a question, feel free, by the way, is how a meeting is made. Because, oh, yes, we have Kate again.
I'm thinking in terms, if I was just to go to Staples, is that a sufficient place to be going to look at some of this stuff, as opposed to going to Google or Amazon and waiting for something to show up and then finding out that it actually isn't suitable for me? So are there recommendations there? Kind of similar, something more hands-on for me to take a look at, as opposed to, Googling.
Sure. That's a very good question. I personally like Staples and Best Buy and going in and getting a feel for them. One, because I can flash my status card, which makes it a little easier than Amazon. But two, because just as Kate was saying, you get to have firsthand experience with them. The drawbacks are with that is that with the very wide range of microphones, webcams, and lighting equipment you can find in the world, Staples or Best Buy might have maybe a fraction of a percentage. That's being generous. So you might find something that sounds really good and it perfectly matches your use case, but they don't have it. For instance, what we use at the Cardin offices here most commonly is this guy. I'm not going to move it too much so I don't deafen you. It's called a Shure SM7B, or the other model we use, which is this one, is the Shure MV7. Those guys can be a bit pricey, but they fit our use case very well. They're also something I've never seen in person in a store. I've always custom ordered them online because, as far as I'm concerned, they don't exist in retail stores. And that's because they're a very specific use case, and they require some very specific know-how to set them up properly and allow for the proper processing. Not usually something your average Staples go-getter is going to have in abundance. So Staples tends not to pack them. But Staples and Best Buy are a great place to start. If you can find something there that works, go for it. Feel free to return it. Same goes for Amazon. They have a pretty lenient return policy, sort of most online stores, where you can just say, nah, I don't like it. Even 2 weeks into using it, microphone and lighting and camera equipment is pretty generous with that because they're not sanitary products. Hopefully you're not eating your microphone or rubbing your face on your camera. So they won't have a problem accepting a return. Usually it's a good way to go. Now, when I talk about making a meeting, we have all that equipment done. Let's say you've gone out, you found your perfect stuff. Fantastic. What do all these settings mean? Oh my God, there's so many toggles. I don't understand any of them. Fantastic. Good. The making of a meeting can often be just as important as actually doing one. For instance, if you haven't set an end time to your meeting, you may just say, well, I want the meeting to start at 9 a.m. and we'll just go. I might have in my head that I want it to be an 8-hour learning program with the rest of the employees here and we can learn throughout the day. But if no one knows that, they'll suddenly schedule something in for 11 and we'll have to leave. Very important to make clear your requirements ahead of time. So that includes the kind of presentation it's going to be, the expectations for your participants, whether they will have had to read ahead certain materials, or what kind of environment it is, professional or casual. This is also a place to enable a few of those moderation settings, such as waiting rooms. Say, for instance, it's a community meeting and you want only community members participating. You could have a waiting room to enable only certain participants in, and you can read their names and vet them as they are processed. There's a whole bunch of settings, not only these, but even more that I'm not going to cover because there's just too many. But if you don't understand something, read it. Google that setting. Maybe if it's the second one there, mute participants upon entry. I don't understand what that means. Well, Google, Zoom, mute participants upon entry. I'm sure there's someone who's made a blog article about it, so I'm not going to repeat it. But all of those settings are useful. It's worth poking around, spending a solid hour looking at these things, figuring out exactly how they work, and then coming back to it to ensure that you don't have to fiddle with these things live as they come up, disrupting everyone else's participation. Now, this also includes things like enable co-hosting permissions so that people can help you moderate chat, participants, make sure everyone's on a proper basis for respect of other people. Check whether it's open to all or private to some, as I said. And then we get into the next part, which is the invitation. And that seems pretty easy. Oh, it's just a link I send to people, right? And that's true, but it comes with a few things to think about on top of that. How are you sending it out? Social media, such as LinkedIn and Facebook. Facebook especially tends to be very, very popular with Indigenous communities throughout Canada. I can't find a community that hasn't used Facebook so far. And that makes it a very good engagement tool. But that doesn't mean it should be your only one. The more, the better, whether it be pamphlets that you hand out, maybe not so much during COVID, phone calls, individual emails to maybe a members list or a participants list if it's maybe a staff meeting. Your own nation's or organization's website is a great place so that there's a unified front for people to find your information. And preparing all of these things and thinking about them ahead of time so that you're not just ad-libbing and writing an improvisational invitation as you go. These things need to be your best foot forward, as it were, your first impression. So it should be just as good as the material you've presented ahead of time. And also on the right-hand side or left, depending on where you have me on your screen, is a little box clarifying a few things I tend to recommend including, such as time, start and end. I've talked about those already. Date or dates, so that they know well in advance when they're going to have to be there or other meetings they could catch. A summary of what's going to be covered. An agenda, so they know when and in what order it's going to be covered. A meeting link, for obvious reasons, or a phone number for call-in services, and required materials. For an educational setting, you don't want people forgetting their virtual textbooks, as it were, but that covers a lot of our nation-building work. If I needed all of the leadership of a nation to read their strategic plan before coming, it would mean if they didn't, I'd have to spend an extra, quite a long while going through their strategic plan with them. It respects everyone's time if everyone is on the same basis for what they should be doing well in advance. Going forward a little bit, talking about those agendas, we arrive to the reason that they're there. And it serves a few purposes. One, it allows us to give everyone a clear expectation of what on earth is going on, because if there's a large grouping of topics, organizing them slightly can make them seem far less intimidating. But also, it allows for some flexibility. Because as soon as we start scheduling in an introduction or a round circle introduction and an outro or closing comments, those kinds of things are allowed time. A lot of Indigenous communities have Indigenous people, surprisingly enough, where we value our names and our identities very, very highly. A traditional Western-style introduction is all 10 of us going around and saying, "Hi, my name is Justin Chorines." Next person. Very frequently, and especially when we get to youth and elders where those things are very appropriate, we find that people would like to introduce themselves as their Indigenous name, the nation they come from, how they're involved with this project, the history of how they're involved, why they think it's important, what they'd like to get out of a meeting or an engagement. Those things can become supremely important very, very quickly. And it's best to hear those thoughts. It's best to make people feel valued and participating in your session, engagement, workshop, whatever it is, so that they have a stake in what is learned. And the same goes for outros and closing comments. If they're able to present their thoughts in review format, it summarizes a great deal of what's gone on instead of just hoping and praying that they've taken good enough notes to remember everything. Now, along with the healthy introduction and outro should also be a few breaks here and there, just as I do have in this presentation, mostly as an example. We want to make sure that people feel engaged and like they aren't going to fall asleep any second. Especially me, I have a tendency to drift off if maybe I haven't been speaking for 3 hours in an 8-hour Zoom meeting. So encouraging people to get up, go get a coffee, go get a cookie, find a dog to hug, something, so that they feel a little more alive. A lot of what certainly I was raised with, and I've seen in a lot of Indigenous communities, is it's not really very natural to sit in a chair for 8 hours and not say anything and expect full alertness and wakefulness the whole time. You have to have some sort of engagement and tactility to walking around, making sure people aren't feeling constrained and bored. Now, having said all that, we're going to go on to the materials that are just as important, whether that be a PowerPoint, like this one, or a video, pictures, a script, a series of notes, whatever it is. Those kinds of things should be prepared and reviewed well in advance. Reason being, you want to be familiar with your material. Not only that, you want to be able to edit them, whether yourself when you've taken time away so that you can come back with a fresh perspective, or so that a coworker can come and review them and say, oh, you have a typo here, or this doesn't make sense, and I don't think that's really necessary. It's important to get a second perspective, even if it's just yours from later on. Those kinds of things can be immeasurably helpful. Also, being familiar with your material allows you to avoid just reading your PowerPoint word for word, or your script word for word, or your video just providing the same narration. And that's important because a PowerPoint is not a presentation. It's a presentation tool. And a good presentation is not just a PowerPoint. Insulting people's ability to read by reading the words verbatim is not a good tactic. Typically, you want to use those points as a leaping off point to expand and provide your own thoughts, opinions, commentary, and expand on what is an introductory sentence or statement. I'm aware of the irony of doing this, but I'm going to read the third point I have there, which is reading a PowerPoint is not a presentation. Expand on your ideas and engage your audience. Obviously, me reading that was not as engaging as listening to someone provide their opinion, thoughts, and experiences. Our very last point touches on why it's important to format your presentation materials a certain way. Larger text, easier to read, very simple, for a few reasons. Elders and youth in our communities do not have the same access to education that we might enjoy having already gone to school or already received an education or practice reading. Some might be visually or auditory impaired. Some might not be able to see it at all if they don't have access to a stable internet connection. Some may be watching on their phones as they attend to other duties. So being able to expand on those points rather than just have an entire paragraph of what you're talking about and then reading it word for word. Now, moving on from there, we have what I referred to earlier as our 5-minute little cute break. This is mostly for demonstration purposes because I really want you to try this. I'm encouraging you to go walk around, find something that you can hold with your hands, or go do, maybe grab a coffee, find a friend that you can hold their hand, something, anything. I'm going to mute my audio and video. I'm going to go do the same thing, and I'll check in 3 or 4 minutes and make sure everyone's here before we continue. But thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Alrighty. Hello again, everyone. I'm going to start the process of seeing who's back. Unfortunately, I didn't bring enough snacks for the entire class, but I'm hoping at least some of you have returned. Maybe a coffee in hand or a drink. Hey, perfect. We have a few people back. Aubrey, it looks like you found something. Fantastic. All right. I'm going to wait for just a few more people to say hello, and then I'll get us started. See a few more thumbs back. Excellent. Perfect. Okay. I think I'll feel comfortable continuing. And if they haven't joined us back yet, we have a fancy recording to rely on later on. So, moving past the 5-minute break and why it might be beneficial, hopefully you're tasting the results of that now with a snack or a drink. But we get to my favorite part of the whole presentation, which is some of the skill sets which might not be second nature to most of us. They certainly weren't for me. Let's get into beginning a meeting. There's a few things to remember. First is laying out the virtual welcome mat, as it were. Thanking people for joining, thanking people for being there, because it really is a lot of people taking time out of their day. This is something that happens a lot with in-person facilitation, meetings, education, what have you. It creates a good atmosphere. It allows you to introduce yourself ahead of formal presentations and allow people to get to know who you are as a presenter and feel more comfortable participating because of it. There's also the appreciation you should show when people join the meeting early so that you can test out your equipment. Does my mic sound okay? Are you seeing me okay? Does the green screen look weird? Do I have a funny cat filter on? All of those things you can test in advance, and other people can test with you. Makes for a much easier starting point when the meeting start time actually comes to pass. There's also the introducing of yourself with a little bit of humility and respect. For instance, me here today, I'm not an expert. I don't have all of the answers. I am well educated in this field from a decade of experience, but I'm happy to learn just as much as anyone. I'm constantly Googling tech problems, so I'm learning probably more than the people I'm helping, I think. So, especially within Indigenous communities, that holds a big part because, one, a lot of Indigenous communities do not hold the same power dynamics that a lot of organizations or traditional Western governments do. There isn't one person who has power over everyone else under all circumstances. It's a community. We rely on each other, and that has to be remembered. No one person is there to be listened to under all conditions for everything. It is simply that some have information that is worthy to be passed on to others. This is also a good time to establish rules for the meeting, meaning it's good to clarify if people can unmute themselves, if you welcome discussion at any time, or maybe you'd prefer if they wait to the end. If you'd welcome crosstalk between members, or if you just want feedback towards a chair or a head of a meeting, and conversation between participants can happen afterwards. A lot of educational type meetings will ask that you leave your webcam on to ensure participation, but some are perfectly fine leaving it off. And that comes down to your personal preferences, what you'd like to get out of the meeting, as well as what everyone participating is comfortable with. Moving on to the next part is moderation. It may sound very, very boring and sort of obvious, but as soon as you start doing these for long enough, as some of us have over the last year, it becomes obvious that not everyone uses chat the same. Some people love arguing, and sometimes there's not a lot that can be done about that other than asking them to please leave comments until the end, or maybe address comments privately, separate from a public forum. Perhaps people are not respecting that their mic is live or unmuted when someone else has the floor for speaking. So a co-host or someone who is not the presenter is sometimes very useful to be able to mute them for you. For instance, here today, I'm lucky enough to be a part of a presentation where I have two others who can take care of letting people into the meeting. So as I see people joining, I don't have to worry about finding my mouse and clicking around and wasting all your time. Instead, I can rely on others. The same way, if someone needed to be muted, I can count on the fact I don't need to do that. I can focus on the presentation and ensure that the meeting goes along smoothly. Having co-hosts and separate people doing that is often the best way to go. Now, we also have tips for video. This is something I have gotten used to over the last 10 or so years in working with things like TeamSpeak, Ventrilo, Skype, all the ones that came before it, and then eventually Zoom. Sorry about that. And it is essentially that people seem to have a different skill set when it comes to talking to a room full of people versus a single camera. A single camera is a single point of focus. So it requires a little bit of dedication to simply be able to stare deep into the eyes of the audience unflinchingly without blinking and not make it creepy. So there is a delicate balance to be struck. And it's also important to remember yourself as a presenter that I know I can reach out to about here without my hands going wildly out of frame. At the same time, I can go down a certain amount, I can go up a certain amount, and I can go a certain amount back before my head just becomes a little wee cluster of pixels right at the back. I also don't want to get so far forward that you have a wonderful view of up my nose and nothing else. Especially with laptops being the main way people are interacting with this medium of Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams or WeTalk or whatever it happens to be. The microphone and camera are built into the system, which is amazingly convenient. However, it comes with the disbenefit of usually what we're reading is separate from the camera. It's either below a webcam or above a webcam, meaning it's very easy for if the camera is right in front of us here, we are looking down at our presentation. And having me present to the table in front of me may be convenient for me so I can read, and that means you're looking just at the top of my head, which won't get better as I get older and already isn't great to look at. So it's better to look forward, be familiar with your material. That way you avoid a lot of the awkward staring off into space as you present. That also comes with a little bit of practice. No one's going to get this overnight. I certainly still have work to improve on, for sure. But it's something that you have to keep practicing. The very last point is something I've covered before, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but is be aware of your background. Messy living rooms are not as preferable to a neutral background bookcase or maybe just a blank wall. Short of that, not highlighting them is a great way to go. So having light pointed towards you instead of having just a room light that illuminates everything equally. Great place to start. A point that I kind of crosses over between audio and video is not jostling things, especially with people having your face all big and blown up on their TV or laptop or computer screen. You want to avoid jiggling the camera. I'm not going to do that here, don't worry. But it can lead to some weird distortion. It makes it uncomfortable to watch, and it can even cause motion sickness in some of us. And trust me, that's not fun to be in the middle of an 8-hour lecture only to go, I can't watch anymore. So going into that part with audio, the same thing applies to microphones. Don't jiggle them. These are the representation of your audience's ears. That holds a few consequences. One, you have to speak loudly and clearly. Just because it's right in front of you, a lot of us have the tendency to simply get up as close to them and go, I'm going to be Justin Chorines presenting to you here live from North Vancouver, British Columbia. And that lends itself well to an NPR-style maybe audiobook setting, but not so much for a lively presentation where you want to keep everyone's attention equally. In the same vein, there's a few other points to cover. Mainly, don't tap it. Especially when considering that microphones are built into laptops or computers, we tend to type on them. But if you think about the actual mechanics of that, you're essentially typing on someone's head while you're doing so. So usually, typing while presenting, not a great idea. It does create a lot of noise, and it can be very distracting. Also tends to jiggle the screen a little bit, so you get that webcam wobble thing going. Staying close to the microphone for obvious reasons, but an auditory demonstration is always best. So as I continue talking, I'm going to slowly move myself away from my microphone. And even though there's only a distance of, I'd say, a foot, I'm suddenly very difficult to hear, if you can hear me at all, and I hope you can. But as I get closer, it becomes much easier. And now I'm about an inch, 2 inches away from the microphone. It may not look like it on the camera there, but I promise I'm very close. This also goes hand in hand with being gentle with it and avoiding the common pitfalls of slapping it and moving your arms around as I move my note-taking device, not whacking it in the side, because that is the representation of your audience's ear. Try not to bang it around. There is also our last point that I haven't covered here, which is background noise. I hope for obvious reasons, background noise is not particularly productive in a discussion, either in community meetings or a presentation format. Having a loud dog barking, as cute as it will be, is going to take away from the discussion. Because it's a digital signal, you may even not be able to hear my voice once that background noise starts. That applies to cars outside, or maybe a washing machine going, or a significant other in the house, maybe letting them know you'll be busy doing something for the next little while. All those things can make participation on both ends a big improvement. We also now get to some of the final slides here that I have, this one being, good question. This covers the fact that people like Kate or Aubrey or Michelle are very likely to ask questions, and that's a great thing. I want to encourage that. The more questions, the better. And the best way to get others to participate is to make those that have already participated, holding them up as a standard, as an example that they are welcome to have shared, and I really appreciate it. If I were dismissive and disregard Kate's question, it would not lend itself to good discourse. That especially becomes prevalent in Indigenous communities where historically we have challenges sharing. And that comes in a lot of different forms and from a lot of different places. But to make it easier for all of us, having a respectful environment that feels safe and welcoming is the best place to start. Because the elder who's been through twice as much as I could even imagine is going to have a harder time sharing if I don't allow any time at the end or the beginning for questions. Or when someone has asked a question before, I'm very dismissive and non-committal in answering. So we have to be very sensitive towards people's participation and making them feel a good way about participating. Being polite and being the bigger person is the last point I have here, which is more or less to address a previous point that some people just want to argue. And especially in small Indigenous communities, a lot of us know each other. And a lot of us have some pretty passionate viewpoints because these issues are important to us, say in a community meeting or an engagement session or an annual general meeting. But that doesn't mean that I have the right to make everyone else feel uncomfortable to share my passionate viewpoint. I have to be respectful of everyone listening. So it's important for those chairing a meeting or hosting an event or presenting an idea to ensure that everyone follows the same courtesies and guidelines we've set out at the beginning using an agenda or an equally similar outro or intro process. Now, that also kind of ties into this go with the flow mentality that a lot of us don't have going into it. We want everything to be perfect. We want the presentation to go perfectly smooth. But it happens. Computers are great when they work. They're not so great when they don't work. They're infuriating, to put it mildly. If your webcam fails, if the presentation fails, if your mic suddenly turns off, be aware that people have been in that position before. Everyone participating knows that problems happen. The real disruption comes when you refuse to go on with a presentation or a meeting before fixing it. It's better to simply go on, use a backup piece of equipment, use a backup presentation, ask everyone to imagine it with you, and simply move on. Remedy the situation so it doesn't happen next time. Be kind to yourself and be kind to others, because they will understand, I promise. Now, after the meeting is done, congrats, you finished it, we're almost there. You have to thank everyone for joining, and that's very important. These people have taken the time out of their day to participate in whatever you're doing and focused for almost the entirety, hopefully. And you want to show some appreciation for that. That'll help them participate next time. You can remind them of dates and times that it's happening, provide helpful insight, so maybe joining 15 minutes earlier, whatever it happens to be, maybe reviewing some of the material with them, thanking them for their opinions and their viewpoints on things, and sharing the documents that you might have worked on together, whether that be meeting minutes or a plan or any documents you might have edited together. Those kinds of things provided right afterward allow that information to be fresh in everyone's minds without the, I think I did that last week. Is this about that? I can't remember. I'll just wait till the next meeting. And generally nothing gets done because of it. So being right on top of your follow-up is just as important as sending out an invitation ahead of time. Now, we're more or less done. Congrats. Oh, but something happened midway through. My computer is not happy in the slightest. And that's going to happen. There is no computer on Earth that functions perfectly 100% of the time, and there never will be. And things are going to go wrong. The best thing to do is be patient and know that someone has had that problem before. Honestly, it's probably me, but there are others who have made blog posts, videos, informationals, whatever it happens to be. So those are 3 sources I use quite a lot, which is the support site from Zoom, as well as a few different universities. And they provide some excellent articles on very common issues, such as my microphone stopped working, my screen share isn't working properly, my account won't let me in, etc., etc. So I highly recommend Googling, using as simple terms as you can, and being patient. Go with the flow, as one of the last slides said, because it's really true. Being frustrated about it isn't going to help, and I know that's easier to say than it is to do, but I recommend going for a walk, taking a break, coming back. Half of the time, most of my IT fixes are just I've taken my dog for a walk and figured it out while I was out, and I run back inside to quickly address it while I still have it in my head. Now, that we've covered all of that, I'm sure I have not covered every single person's every concern that they might have had, and that's fine. But know that I'm here to help, but so are a lot of other people. You can Google your questions, you can use online video, written resources that are invaluable. But not only that, there are opportunities to do even more to help yourself, such as completing a survey informational that allows you to win $400 Visa gift cards, if that perhaps was around somewhere for us to use. And there is. I'll let Michelle speak to that, actually.
$400. You have a really good chance this week to win. There's 2 of them. Just fill out that link that Elizabeth is going to send out, and your name will be entered to win. So good luck. Good luck. So thank you so much, Justin. I listened to this presentation this morning, and it brought back so many memories over the past year. And I remember and I just thought of another memory, was I forgot my Zoom password. I don't know how that happens. And so panic set in, heart rate's up, started to sweat, and I knew I had people waiting. And so I really like and appreciate what you said. Patience is really important. Just take a deep breath, just relax, and it will come to you. And so I appreciate all the tools, all the wisdom, the knowledge, the tips that you had shared this afternoon. Does anyone have any comments or questions or their own stories? Yeah, Kate.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the information. I just dropped my question on the ground here, so let me just pick it up. Patience, please. I'm just kidding. I am really excited to start pivoting my business to an online presence. Obviously, I just had another in-person workshop canceled. I'm talking to you from Regina, Saskatchewan. So apparently we're the hotbed of Canada's COVID variants struggles here. So I had a workshop booked on Monday, and in due diligence, I canceled it with the client. It was an in-person session. So I recommended us doing something maybe remotely. I don't know how to host on Zoom, but there's another thing I wanted to do. I wanted to start engaging more with my clients or my people who follow me on my business page. So I was hoping, my goal is to do exactly what Michelle's been doing. You've been slaying it in that respect. Doing Zoom invites for free sessions and webinars, group stuff through my Facebook biz page. Now, the concern I have is just, how do you manage all of those? Do you just do a public, here's the Zoom link and anybody can log in? Or do you do it, contact me, email me, and I'll send you the link, so that it's for Indigenous people. So I'd like to kind of maintain that.
That's a fantastic question. I'm not sure I can come up with a perfect solution for you right off the bat, but in my experience, what I have seen most commonly done is nations or organizations will use Facebook as a platform rather than the end goal. And I'll explain what I mean. So what I would always recommend of any business, regardless of how small, is to set up your own website, have that hosted completely separately from Facebook, and that allows you control over your own content, over your own information. That way you can post on Facebook, I'm holding a free Zoom webinar on this topic. If you'd like more information, it's at this date, go to my website. On your website, there you can have the link. This avoids a few common pitfalls. One, people posting open invite links to Facebook are susceptible to a lot of unfortunate characters joining, because the internet's a wonderful place, but it can also be an annoying place, full of people with nothing but time on their hands and a Zoom account who will join and disrupt the meeting. So having that second step of going to a website usually deters 90% of them, because they go, I don't want to go to a website that'll ask me to sign up. When in fact, it's just a link that you control and you can change and you can alter. Facebook does have its own, and this comes with anything, whether it be LinkedIn, someone else's service, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, all come with terms and conditions we all sign off on, which essentially say everything you post, everything you publish, everything you upload is ours. We can use it however we please. We can alter it, delete it, keep it for whatever reason. And that means if you post a Zoom link and decide later, oh, I'd like to delete it. Oh, but it turns out you forgot your account password, so you can't delete it. There's a whole host of other scenarios, but having your own website where you control information will also allow you to say, record that workshop and then upload it as a video later. So people can get a taste of what your business is about without actually having to tune into a live event. And that way they're more incentivized to go, you know what, that was really interesting. I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to tell my friend to come with me too. And suddenly you've doubled the audience from that one engagement without actually having to host an event. Facebook makes that a little bit harder.
Okay.
And it sounds intimidating to set up a website, but especially with today's tools, it's quite literally a 15-minute process.
I actually set up my own website already, and I am not technologically
Woohoo!
compliant. I am technically challenged. I've joked all the time, lights shut off when I'm walking past them or I'm driving past them. If you want a cell phone to expire prematurely, let me hang on to it, those types of things. So I wanted to do the website because I do financial wellness. And I wanted everything I do, I walk my talk. So I wanted them to know if someone like myself can build her own website. It's a splash page, it's a landing page, but it's not bad. But that's what I don't engage on the website though, because it's mostly a splash page. I wanted to blog. I wanted to start podcasting. I want to get the message of financial wellness out there. Sorry, I know you guys are still recording it. I'm not going to hijack. Sorry. Michelle was going to add something to that because I'm trying to go the direction that you are in already, Michelle. Thank you so much for that, Justin.
Yeah. I just think you gotta, so for me, it was just trial and error, to be honest. I was really, originally when I would host events, people would have to be let in and they would be in the waiting room, but I found that posed a lot of problems because then I would have to go let them in. So it was a lot of trial and error and what works for me really well. And I think it was just because of the community that I built. So we haven't had anyone hijack any of my meetings yet, and I knock on wood. So it's been really good, but I also brought somebody in to co-host as well. So when I'm busy doing my thing, they can make sure. So having that person, having that extra is really, really helpful. I personally like the Zoom versus say going Facebook Live, then everybody could see it, right? And I don't necessarily want everybody to see everything. So I really like Zoom a lot, but I also pay, I think you can pay, there's your basic package, which is free. And then if you upgrade like just $20 a month, I like that. And to me, it was a really good investment. $20 a month, really, I felt pretty good with that. But also open up to other options as well. Not everybody likes the Zoom piece, right? So maybe just know that there's other platforms that you can access and just trial and error, give it a try, right?
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Kate, for participating. Those are some good questions because that's a lot of the same questions and issues that a lot of people face as I want to get started. What should I do for equipment? What should I do for setup? How's the best way to engage people? I love that. Thank you.
Well, this has been an absolutely amazing workshop. Like, I feel like I've done everything wrong. No, just kidding. You pointed out all the good stuff that you need to know, which I really appreciated about it. It was never like, oh, like this is wrong or you have to do this. It was very just like, these are like best practices and what you can do to take you just that next step further. And I loved that because obviously like I come on here and I host, and it's just I'm starting to think like I should have closed my blinds before I started this one. But that's the thing, like we're learning as we go, like this virtual world, it might be a new norm moving forward. Like there will be hybrid, there will be things that are completely still online, completely go back to person. We never really know. So it's been so amazing to listen to this one. And Kate, I can't wait to see what you do, because I'll definitely attend your virtual events when you have those going. But Justin, it's been amazing. And Michelle, like I know she's been kind of, slaying the game with doing workouts, and people have so much great feedback. So it's so nice to see like people like you helping expand other people's businesses. It's been amazing.
Awesome. So anyone else? I see John on there. No pressure at all, John, but if you feel like you wanted to lend your voice, yes, go ahead, John.
Well, I just wanted to say I very much appreciate this session, and it's very informative. And also, I think for just a user, somebody who's a participant, it's very helpful as well. Many of the tips apply to us as well, especially protocol, courtesy, respecting the elders. All those elements I think are very important, and I'm glad they're all brought out. So thanks very much.
I'm glad you got a lot from it. Thank you so much, John.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We are honored that you chose us to spend an hour of your Thursday afternoon. Justin, again, thank you for the knowledge that you shared. You didn't say you were an expertise in this field, but I think you're an expertise. You brought some really good knowledge today. And I feel, honestly, I'm walking away feeling empowered. I have some things that I know that I need to do to make the Zoom work for me on my end. So I really appreciate what you brought to the table today. So you all, thank you. Hope you have a good rest of the day. We just really want to acknowledge Can-Do that they've hosted these Links to Learning series. We're going to be on pause next week, but we're coming back. There's a little bit of a transition, a little bit of change. On Tuesday, it's going to be 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that's my time zone. And then Thursday, I believe it's 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And that's going to go from April to June. So there'll be more opportunity for you to learn and to grow and to listen and to participate. So we'd love to see you back here. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, we always got to give a shout out to Creator, the gift of another day, the gift of land, the sacred waters, the animals, the plants, the elders, the ancestors who walked before us, and the loved ones who are surrounded, by us in the circle. So we give thanks for all these gifts that have been given to us. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and we will see you again. Peace.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.